Before we dive in, just a quick reminder to everyone that the session will be recorded. Throughout the webinar, be sure to keep an eye on the chat for helpful links that we're going to share, and feel free to use the chat to comment, ask any questions, and we'll get to them later on in the Q&A session. And just feel free to chat and share suggestions. We're a community of learners and doers, so please do share. I'm Sarah Holman. I'm the membership chair and one of the board members of Wild Ones NJ Gateway. And we are here tonight and every day to raise awareness about the urgent need for more native plants in our landscapes. And by native plants, we mean the flora that existed here long before the arrival of the European explorers, those plants that are part of the natural heritage of the Lenape people, whose ancestral homeland includes the counties we serve here in New Jersey and beyond. We acknowledge them and we hope one day we can live in harmony with the earth as they do, seeing the planet as a living entity that must be respected and cared for. For those new to Wild Ones, we're a national nonprofit with over 129 chapters across 36 states. Our mission is to promote environmentally sound landscaping practices that preserve biodiversity by focusing on preservation, restoration, and creation of native plant communities. You can learn more about us at wildones.org, where you'll find a wealth of resources to help you design your outdoor spaces. On a local level, Wild Ones New Jersey Gateway chapter serves 6 counties in the Garden State, including Passaic, Bergen, Hudson, Essex, Union, and Middlesex. We are also collaborating with Wild Ones Skyland chapter as they rebuild their board. So our goal for 2025 is to strengthen these communities through educational events like the webinar that we're having today, tabling events, demonstration gardens, plant sales, field trips, and more. And we can't do this without your support. So please share our vision and information. And if you're in the New Jersey area, please consider becoming a member of our chapter. And if you're not, consider becoming a member of your local chapter and think about volunteering with us. Together we can make a difference. Now, without further ado, this evening, I'd like to introduce Kelly I. Zimmerman. She's an entomologist and a passionate science communicator. Kelly did her defense this Friday, actually, for her doctorate in environmental science with her research in mosquito genetics and behavior. So please give her some congratulations. With a deep love for the natural world, she brings the wonders of science to a wide audience through engaging storytelling and expert insights. As the co-host of the podcast Bugs Need Heroes, Kelly highlights the often overlooked superpowers of insects. Her talks make more complex science accessible and exciting for fans of all ages. And we appreciate Kelly's ability to make science both informative and entertaining, bridging the gap between academia and the wider public. So we all want to give a big thanks to Kelly for sharing with us tonight. And now, Kelly, please take the floor.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the congratulations. I really appreciate that. Let me open up my thing here. Here we go. All right. So I am there we go. So yes, thank you so much for coming and listening to me talk tonight. As I was so kindly introduced, I have I just completed my doctorate. I'm an entomologist and an ecologist, and my focus is on insects, generally behavior. So I'm very excited to talk to you about good bugs and what they can do for your gardens, and how to attract them. So I'll start off with an introduction where I can explain a little bit about bugs in general, some misconceptions, their overall importance to the ecosystem that is your garden. And then I'll discuss a few beneficials and how you can invite them into your private space. All right, so why do we care? Why talk about insects? Well, insects are the backbone of every ecosystem, aside from our friends, the plants, of course. Without insects, we wouldn't have plants. We need them to pollinate. They also engage in decomposition, which means they break down bacteria, they break down old plant matter. If we didn't have insects doing this job along with the fungi, we would have big piles of just detritus in our yards and all around us. They're a food source. Maybe if you don't love bugs so much, but you love birds, having insects around for them to eat in your garden is very important. Robins and starlings and many birds, half of their food source ends up being insects. Um, Soil aeration is, of course, important as well. And I'll get into which bugs are kind of important for that task. You definitely want well aerated soils if you're going to plant a nice healthy garden. Pest control, you need the good bugs to eat the bad bugs. It's really important. And every ecosystem, regardless of whether it's small and cultivated like your yard, or if it's a large booming forest, biodiversity is key to a healthy system. So now a few common misconceptions before we get into the whole talk. Bugs are either friends or foe. Now, I know generally in this talk I've used the word insect, but I will be discussing some other sweet little crawlies, sweet little bug friends, and that would include the myriapods, which are centipedes and millipedes, as well as spiders and other arachnids like mites. Or if you're out west, I suppose you've got some scorpions out there as well. So bugs are not either friend or foe. They're not either good or bad. Some bugs can be both at the same time. Certainly, yellow jackets have a bit of a reputation of being bad bugs, but they are pollinators. And yellow jackets feed on some of the insects we would consider pests in our gardens. But they also sting us on occasion. So it's a little bit more complex than who's good and who's bad. The use of pesticides only targets specific bugs. This is not always the case. I really try to advocate for not using pesticides whenever possible, and I'll talk about a few alternatives to that later in the talk. Wasps are tiny flying demons. I get photos and text messages and phone calls from friends and family. How do I get rid of these wasps? Are they dangerous? They're going to sting me. And half the time they don't. I know sometimes they can be a little bit aggressive, but don't flail around and cause a big ruckus when you see them. I have personally been handling insects and other arthropods for, God, the greater part of maybe 20 years now. And I've never been stung by a wasp or a bee or anything. I've been bitten by things, mosquitoes mostly, but not a big problem. Bugs are unclean is another common misconception. Bugs are incredibly clean animals, and they are animals. It's very important that we think about bugs as animals just the same way we would think about a bird or your dog or cat. They clean themselves all the time. So you can see in this image here, the antennae, say on the ladybug or the lacewing, they're constantly grooming those antennae because they need to pick up on chemical signals to find mates, to find food, to find water. They're always cleaning themselves. Even cockroaches, who I know we associate with filth, are very clean animals. And you'll actually find some cockroaches probably out in your garden, and they're nothing to worry about. We have field cockroaches out here, and they have no interest in your house. They're tiny and they will run away, but they're not dirty. They're just animals. Um, and we have this issue in, I think sometimes in research a lot, is that inhumane treatment is okay because bugs can't feel pain. We don't know that for sure. What they feel is a hotly debated topic in entomology and biology in general. Now, they do have nervous systems just like we do. They have they have neurons and what we call nociceptors along their bodies, and they take in signals that are uncomfortable. Too hot, too cold, if you pinch them, they all react. They move away from this harmful stimulus or multiple stimuli. And that's because they are feeling something. Is it the same kind of pain we feel, we experience as vertebrates? I don't know. We don't know in general. But I think it's always important to treat them as humanely as possible because it costs us nothing to be kind, and to be careful. So if you have to get rid of them, try to do it in a quick way. Not to be graphic, but a quick smash is probably the best thing you can do. It's another reason why I do not advocate for pesticides. Pesticides usually interfere with their neurological systems. It is a very uncomfortable way to go. So we'll talk about pesticides and stuff later. And also that bugs are dumb. Bugs are not dumb. A little anecdote. So for my master's degree, I worked on arthropod sensory systems. And one of the animals I worked with was I had 22 Hogna carolinensis, which are the Carolina wolf spider. Now, those wolfies are the biggest wolf spider species we have north of Mexico. They're about maybe 2 inches. A big female has a 2-inch body. It's not even counting legs. And they're all kept in my lab in individual containers, like takeout containers, because they will cannibalize. They'll eat each other. And I would come in once a week and feed them a cricket, make sure they had water, and then go before, unless I was using them that day for research. And I was good to them for research. There was no harm that they came to. After a while, I would say maybe a month or so, they would start scratching at the front of their little food containers when I'd open the lab door and they saw me. And I think they were associating me with food. That's not dumb, right? That's not what a dumb animal does. So I think there's a little bit more to that than we generally think about. There's a lot to be learned about insect and arachnid cognition. I hope to do some studies on that later, now that I'm done with my dissertation research. But there's a lot to think about. You can also think about ants. One ant may not be brilliant, but a whole colony of ants creates an incredible society. They build bridges out of their bodies so their nestmates can cross water. They build rafts out of their bodies. There's a lot of complex things. They farm aphids and fungi. There's a lot going on there. So I try not to think of them as stupid or dumb. They're so much more interesting than that. Now, your garden, it is an ecosystem. And I mentioned before, even though it's cultivated, it's still it's still an ecosystem. It has plants and soil and insects and other things like birds. Now, they all work together. They are all one large interconnected system. If you have poor soil, you will have bad plants. If you don't have healthy plants, you're going to have a hard time with pest insects, and you may not be attracting the right pollinators. If you don't have insects, you're probably not getting those beautiful birds coming to your feeders. Everything is an interlocking system. So when you want to have a healthy garden, we have to consider all of these specific parts and pieces. You can think of it as one big puzzle. Now let's talk about pests. The word pest is a human label. There are no pests in the wild. It's really just things that bother us. Are they a nuisance in our garden? Do they sting us? I'm sure you've seen these cute little oleander aphids. They are invasive and cause a lot of damage to our plants. I found a bunch of them on milkweed, I think last summer. Of course, the biggest no-no of all is the yellow jacket. I know everyone hates yellow jackets. And the tobacco and tomato hornworm caterpillars are pests. If you like tomatoes, they're a problem. And maybe one of my least favorite Invasives is the Japanese beetle. Um, my mother-in-law has a beautiful rose garden, and the Japanese beetles wreck it every season. Maybe you have these traps in your yard. They're like long sleeves and they attract the beetles. And I can't tell if they're doing more harm than good. Are they summoning more beetles to the garden or are they doing their job catching them? I still see beetles on the plants, so I don't know. But those things stink when they all get together. So pest, all that to say, pest is really about us. It's not about the animal. And we should try to think, I think, in broader terms when we're discussing insects and not just what's annoying to people. Some of the common pests you probably have in your yard, or maybe the potato beetle, like I mentioned before, the Japanese beetle. Brown marmorated stink bugs are pretty annoying. Uh, Although they do occasionally feed on caterpillars, so maybe if you can get your stink bugs to war with your hornworm caterpillars, you're going to be in good shape. We do have native stink bugs. There's a beautiful green stink bug here in the Northeast that is almost the color. It's about the color of the hornworm, just a little bit more deeper green. Really, really pretty. Uh, and not invasive. So I try not to mess with them if I see them. And of course, aphids. So these are all what humans term as pests. And at least in this instance, some of them invasive, some of them not, depending on what region you're into. That always matters. So let's talk about the beneficials now. This is why everyone's here, right? We're here to talk about the rock stars, your bees, your ladybugs, your ichneumon wasps, which are parasitoids, even the little spiders. If an insect increases the productivity and the health of your garden, that's a beneficial. Um, and it doesn't hurt that a lot of them are very cute. It's hard to look at a bee or a ladybug and not be excited. Ichneumon wasps, which is the little guy on the bottom left, are super interesting. So these are parasitoids. And what they do is they lay their eggs either on or inside of their prey. Some of them do use the hornworm caterpillars, so you want to attract these wasps if you can. And others will take that ovipositor. Now you can see this, it looks like a stinger. It's not a stinger, that's where the eggs come from. She couldn't sting you if she wanted to. She may also put that inside the bark of a tree and implant that egg on beetle larvae. There's lots of species of ichneumon wasp. Some of them have ovipositors that are about as long as your pointer finger. They're absolutely incredible. And those are for really drilling deep into trees. My favorites are the spiders. I love all of them, not just the wolf spiders. This is a little crab spider on the bottom that's white. These guys you'll often find crouched in a flower and they change color. They can be white or yellow or green. And to match their surroundings, they have excellent camouflage. Of course, they're indiscriminate, so they will nab your bees as well if they can. But they're super cool. And then I don't know if you got folks have seen the guy all the way on the bottom right. That is a flower fly, and I'll talk about them later. They look like bees. They're not bees, they're flies. They're good little pollinators, and they serve some other purposes in the garden as well. We have lots of good bugs around. So let's get into the beneficials. I'm going to go through a bit of a list and describe what they are, why they're useful to you, and then how you can attract them to your yard. This is an adult ladybug snacking on an aphid. Should all give that ladybug a round of applause because it's nice. It's nice not to have aphids all the time. And I'll tell you a little story briefly. I live in a city. I am in Jersey City, right next to Manhattan, and I live 30 plus floors up in the sky. And I have a container garden on my balcony where I grow peppers and herbs and a few other things. And the aphids are still here. They're like up here. They probably came in on a plant. I can't seem to get rid of them. And I count my lucky stars every time a ladybug shows up. And believe it or not, I am getting ladybugs, wasps, flower flies, and several species of bee up here 30 plus floors high. So they are around. So whether you're in a nice suburb where you've got lots of space, or you have a little space on a balcony in a city, you can still create a beautiful garden and attract the amazing little buggies to help make everything work out for you. So I'm assuming everyone knows how pollination works, but just in case, you have your pollinator, your visitor, they touch the stamen, which is the male part of the flower. It picks up pollen while they're drinking nectar. And then they visit the next plant and it rubs on the pistil, which is the female part of the plant, and you have fertilization. Pretty simple process. Actually, a lot goes on once fertilization happens, but I'm not talking about plants today. I'm talking about bugs. And we have lots of bug options for pollinators. One of my favorites is the hummingbird hawk moth, which you see on the left. Now they have super long tongues, and that's because they pollinate and drink nectar from cone trumpet-shaped flowers. They come out sometimes during the day. I've definitely seen hummingbird hawk moths during the day, but they'll come out at night as well and pollinate open flowers in the evening. They're super important. And their tongues, there's one species, I think it's Wilsonii. Don't quote me on, I'm pretty sure, or Watsonii, maybe it's Watsonii. It has a tongue, which is a proboscis. We call them proboscises in entomology, that is like several, like a couple feet long. It's the longest tongue in the insect kingdom. It's ridiculous. And when Charles Darwin found this plant with a long trumpet, and they were trying to figure out what could pollinate this because the male parts and the female parts are all the way down the end of the trumpet. And they realized pretty quickly it's got to be a moth because only moths have tongues that are that long. Um, and it was kind of a huge deal when they finally were able to, like years later, when we had photographs, they could photograph it, and it was very cool. But moths are great little pollinators and super important again for those trumpet shapes. Another pollinator that I love are beetles. You can see this little guy is covered in pollen. They don't have pollen sacs. They're just covered in fine hairs that collects pollen. Now, anytime you can see this flower is quite large in the center and really open. That's to accommodate a chunky beetle body. Uh, Beetles are some of our older pollinators, evolutionarily speaking, have been around for millions of years. And these big open flowers were some of the first ones to evolve, and they needed big bodies to transfer pollen. You can also see that the pollen is very close to the stem of the plant. They don't have to reach for it. It just kind of happens. So beetles are very important for your garden if you have open, large flowers. Now also, ants on the right. Maybe folks don't think about ants as pollinators, but they do this job. They like to drink nectar from tiny flowers and flowers that are also very close to the stem. I often see them on wild carrots and Queen Anne's lace. They are very happy on those plants. You've probably seen them on Queen Anne's lace if you paid attention. They're always around. And then one of my favorite bees, these little solitary bees, unlike their sisters who have pollen baskets on their leg, these guys have fanny packs. They have like a little pollen basket right on the abdomen, and the way they gather pollen is to belly flop on the flower. Just a little, you'll see them flying over the flower and then just stop. Let's stop flying, and they like right in there, covered in pollen, and then they move on to the next flower. I love them. They're so cute too. We have lots of species of little solitary bee here in the US. Of course, we have butterflies. Everyone loves butterflies. Unpopular opinion, I think they're a little boring compared to everything else in the garden, but they're certainly beautiful. They also do not have pollen baskets. They end up collecting pollen just through touch on their bodies and on the proboscis. and they share it that way. And of course, bees. Here in North America, we have many species of bee. And what's interesting about our native bees, so not honeybees, they can't do this. Our native bees engage in what we call buzz pollination. They grab flower and they buzz as hard as they can to get the pollen out. Now, things like blueberries and what else we got? Cranberries, I think tomatoes as well, cannot be pollinated unless it's through buzz pollination. So honeybees can't do the job. Only our natives can do that. So if you love blueberries, and blueberries are my favorite fruits, you gotta love a bee. You gotta love a native bee that can do this. It's really fascinating how these two organisms have evolved side by side to get to this point, right? They can only be pollinated by these bees. Super cool. Now, we'll talk a little bit about native versus honey. So honeybees are invasive. They were brought over here from Europe. Usually, I think of Apis mellifera, the European honeybee, but there are a couple other types as well. And we like them for honey, of course. Our native bees do not produce honey. They make little like pollen and nectar packets, and it's to feed their offspring. We don't eat those. They're not good eats, not like honey. But we brought them over here for the honey and to pollinate. But they're pretty lousy pollinators, and not just because they can't do the buzz pollination, they're just not efficient. So if you had an apple tree and you needed an apple tree to be pollinated, it would take about 35 honeybees to do the job of 6 orchard bees. That's the difference in pollen efficiency. And the problem with honeybees that in natives, they outcompete natives in urban spaces. There was a study that came out, when was that? Probably a while ago now, maybe 5-ish years, that the researchers are collecting data on cities. I believe this is in Canada, and seeing the distribution of the honeybee versus the natives. And there was a clear decline in the native bees when honeybees are introduced. And this is because, well, one, a honeybee hive has around 10,000 plus bees. Our native bees are like the metallic green bee or the mason or the orchard bee are solitary. There is no hive. That bee is doing all the work herself to produce offspring, find food for the offspring, kind of pack them in to where they rest for the season. I'll talk about that later. Whereas honeybees have thousands and thousands of sisters out doing all the work and sharing all the chores. Eastern bumblebees and carpenter bees are singular, but bumblebees also, I know some of you are in the West, so you'll have Western bumblebees. They have small hives also in comparison. So maybe 100, maybe 300 bumblebees, again, compared to 10,000 honeybees. So they're easily outcompeted. And they just don't range as far. You can get a honeybee going to about 6 miles to forage, whereas our native bees are going a mile or sometimes less. So it's very easy for them to be outcompeted. So if you have a really big land, maybe you can consider a honeybee hive, but it can be kind of tough on the natives. So just a little food for thought on our natives versus our honeybees. I know that Wild Ones is very much into promoting native wildlife and native plants. So think about your cute little native bees as well every once in a while. Oh, and maybe the best part, a lot of native bees would rather not sting you. If they get crushed, their lineage is over. If you crush a couple honeybees, their sisters move on, the queen keeps making eggs, no big deal. So you're really unlikely to get stung by a native bee unless you squish them. You gotta kind of make it happen. So they're good. See, many reasons to like our natives. Also, they're adorable. Look at that. Look at the colors. I just love them. All right, if you want to attract bees to your yard, leave open patches for the burrowing bees. So a lot of the solitary bees either burrow or they have nests in hollow stems. Bumblebees are burrowers, so you want to keep space for them. These bee hotels are super common. You can get them probably from any big garden store now. You can make your own. Go to the craft store, buy some hollow stems, tie them up, hang them from a tree, and you're kind of good to go. If you don't want to hang them, you can also place them in a bush. The bees will find them. And you don't just attract bees this way. Lots of small insects will use those spaces. I bet you get a couple jumping spiders in there too. You can also give them water. So they need water in the summer. They need to hydrate. They need to cool down. And it's super simple. You can just take a really shallow dish, put water in it and some pebbles. And the pebbles are so the bees don't drown. They need something to stand on. These bees are, of course, those are honeybees in that bottom picture. Even after I just ranted about honeybees versus native bees, but the picture was fine, so I used it. You can make this yourself. This looks like it might actually be an upturned frisbee with water and a few rocks. And then, of course, plant native plants. Our native bees, like this button bush, bees love button bush. The bees evolved with these plants. They're going to be way more attracted to them than they are any fancy ornamental you've got coming in from China or Europe or wherever. So try to keep native plants for native animals. Butterflies and moths are super common pollinators as well, and everybody loves them. They kind of look the same, but there's a little bit of variation in there. Of course, sometimes active at night, although I do know of several moth species that are active during the day. So there's always exceptions. But they're beautiful. I mean, if you've never watched in the spring, butterflies fight, males will fight each other midair. It's very cool. So try to attract them early so you can watch the fun happen. We've got about 14,000 species of leps in North America. A lep just refers to Lepidoptera. That is the order. It is easier for me to say than butterflies and moths every time. So Lepidopterans is what I'm talking about now. And they're interesting to promote in your garden because they require different plants depending on what stage of life they're in. So generally, the female will lay eggs on the underside of a leaf, and that leaf is usually a food source for their caterpillars, which are larvae. And they go through several instars, depends on the species how many they do, but they start off very, very tiny and then grow into these big, beautiful, interesting to look at caterpillars. But if you can see this little tiny guy, this is probably what we call a first instar, very small. And then they become either a chrysalis or a cocoon. Cocoons are generally are moths, and either they're kind of buried and they stay that way for the winter, or up here, this is a bagworm. You've probably seen these if you have evergreen trees in your yard or cedar. There's a little caterpillar in there, all bundled up, waiting for the spring to come. They're pretty cool. They'll wiggle. If you touch them, they'll wiggle a little bit, and that is supposed to be a predator deterrent. Although kids love it, so it's really doesn't work on people very well. But so when they're caterpillars, they will need specific plants to feed. Think of the monarch that requires milkweed to bring in those toxins as a defense. And then when they're adults, they'll drink nectar from different plants. So if you want to attract butterflies and moths, you will need a wide variety of flowering plants in your garden. Generally, they like flat top or clustered flowers, like in these photos. It's so they can land. Butterflies have very small legs and feet. They're not great at holding on to stuff. If you've ever tried to hold a butterfly in your hand, sometimes they'll fall off. They're not really built. They're just not good at gripping things. Not like a dragonfly. If you see dragonflies, they can really tense on things. So they need something kind of flat to hang up. If you want to attract moths, get some night blooming plants that are pale or white. They prefer those in the evening. And you've got lots of choices for that. You'll have to see what's available for your region. Of course, you'll need host plants for the caterpillars. I'm going to beat a dead horse to this whole thing to avoid pesticides. Um, Caterpillars are soft-bodied. They don't have a lot of the armor that other insects have. They're very porous. So pesticides really affect them pretty quickly and very strongly. So I would advise maybe not utilizing them if you can. They need a sunny spot. They need to warm up quickly in the morning so they can get moving. If they can't warm up quickly enough, they are kind of sitting ducks for a predator. So give them some, sorry about those sirens in the background. Like I said, I am in a city. Um, they need a sunny space so they can absorb heat and light, but they also need shelter so they can hide from predators. And you can use a puddling station, which is similar to what I talked about with the bees. Butterflies also need to drink water and to cool off. Sometimes in that puddling station, you can put a little bit of fruit, and they'd be pretty happy to be on that. Orange, banana slices are good, and apple, sliced apple, they'll land on that and drink the nutrients up from that plant, from that fruit rather. Quick list for host plants. Now this is for the Northeast because like I said, I'm a Northeast ecologist, but a lot of this will work for Western species as well. You've got lots of fritillaries all over the country. Any kind of violet will do. Swallowtails in general tend to like trees. Willow or basswood or birch. They also like parsley. Monarchs, milkweed and butterfly weed, painted ladies, pearly everlasting. Yeah, you've got lots of choices. Feel free to maybe take a photo of this screen or a screenshot, or I guess go to the YouTube later and find it. But you can use this as a pretty general guide even for your area when considering host plants. Hoverflies are super cool. They look like bees, but they are not. We have lots in North America, about 828 species. Now, as an entomologist, when I say things like we have 828 species, that means we have 828 described species. So that's the number of species we know of. There's always probably more. Sometimes 50% more is likely, depending how understudied that group might be. So there's probably a lot more than 828 species. We know that flies have radiated pretty widely over evolutionary time, so they tend to be pretty big groups. They are pollinators, the adults, and the larvae are aphid predators. You can see in the image in the top right, it's almost body slamming that aphid there. They're voracious predators of aphids. And they like vegetables and herbs. So if you're like a good vegetable gardener or an herb gardener, you're gonna see some cute little hoverflies. They're also called flower flies. You might hear that common name as well. I see them all the time on my balcony. They're great. They love my herbs. Uh, so I had mentioned that they do look like bees. We call this Batesian mimicry in biology, and that's when a harmless animal looks like a dangerous animal or a potentially dangerous animal. But you can see comparatively, they look very, very different. Look at those big eyes. Honeybees and bees in general have much smaller, narrower eyes. The length of the antennae, flies always have tiny, tiny antennae, and they only have a front wing. Um, Flies come from order Diptera, dipteran, which means two-winged. And they're mostly flying insects, a little insect knowledge for you here. Most insects have four wings. Think about dragonflies. The bees have four wings. I know the bee looks like it has one wing, but it's actually two wings on each side. Butterflies have two wing sets as well. Now, flies evolved that they did original, the common ancestor would have had four wings, but now that second pair of wings is something we call a haltere, and it looks like a gyroscope. It senses humidity and temperature and stabilizes the fly while it moves. That's why it's very hard to catch a fly. They can really turn on a dime, and that's through the stabilization of that neat little haltere. It does look like a gyroscope. I recommend maybe Googling that after the presentation if you're interested, because their whole anatomy is fascinating. Super cool. If you want hoverflies in your yard, and you should, they come in so many different shapes and sizes. They like little flowers, smaller open flowers where the stamen and the pistil are easy to get to. They love herbs. I always see them on my dill plants on the balcony every time. And when the parsley flowers, they're all over it. They're active really early in the season. They'll probably be some of the first pollinators you'll get to your garden. So make sure you've got some early spring flowers. So they're hungry, right? They've emerged from their winter sleep, which we call diapause. It's like hibernating for bugs, and they're hungry. So get some early things going so that they can feast. And they'll return the favor by eating your aphids. Ladybugs, everyone loves a ladybug. We have about 500 species, known species in North America. Man, do they like to eat. 5,000 aphids in their lifetime, and they don't live that long. They will overwinter as adults, maybe 2 seasons, like a full year. And they eat so many bugs. And not only do they eat as adults, they're also eating aphids and all kinds of things as larvae. They're not all red with black spots. They can be yellow, all black, orange. They can have some spots or no spots at all. I know it's pretty common to want to buy them and release them in your yard. I don't recommend that. I recommend trying to attract the ones that are already around. When you buy an animal, whether it's an insect or an arachnid or whatever from these companies, and they say, buy all these ladybugs, release them in your yard. The issue with that is they may come with pathogens. And you don't want those pathogens to get out into your yard and potentially harm the native ladybugs or other insects that are already there. It's far, and you probably also don't really know what species they're going to give you. You don't want to put the wrong ladybugs in your garden if they're not native to that area. So again, just try to attract the insects that you want. And this is what the life cycle looks like. This is the harlequin lady beetle, also known as the Asian lady beetle. This is an invasive species. They sometimes you can tell it's them by that there's an M up here on here we go, on its head. So that M can let you know, but morphology, which is the color and pattern of ladybugs, can be very different even within one species. So it's not a guarantee. If it doesn't have an M, it's not this. So it can be tough to tell. They're not really going anywhere. They've been here a long time. But what I wanted to show you with this life cycle is check out this instars. Look at those larvae. Look at these little monsters down here. They're so cool. They look like spiky little bug versions of alligators. And they do eat. They don't bite. You can kind of pick them up. At least I've never been bitten by one, even though they look scary. Oh, the harlequin lady beetle as an adult might bite. So if you get bitten by a ladybug, it's probably the invasive. Our natives don't really bite. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's unlikely. And in the fall, another way to tell the difference, in the fall, if you get ladybugs coming in your house and up on your ceiling, and I get this sometimes during the seasonal change, it's probably a harlequin. The natives almost never come indoors. They would rather overwinter on the side of your house, under your siding, or in a tree, like tree bark. They don't come in, but something about the harlequin beetles, they do come in to say hello. If you want ladybugs in your yard, the adults do supplement their diet with pollen, so you can use dill or fennel or yarrow. You notice there's a few repeat plants here that a lot of our friendly bugs really like. So killing two birds with one stone or attracting many bugs with one plant if you use them. They like ground cover and they like leaf litter, so they can overwinter in the leaf litter if they don't have like another comfortable space to be. Other predators you might want to think about are lacewings. Um, Lacewings larvae love aphids. Wheel bugs. This wheel bug is eating a Japanese beetle. So if you have a Japanese beetle problem, it's a little harder to attract the predators. Generally, they come if you just have a lot of the prey that they like. Firefly larvae are some of my favorites. Look at that little dinosaur down there taking on a slug, about the same size, if not bigger, than the larvae. Fireflies are having a hard time right now. People keep using mulch. So when a female needs to lay her eggs, she lays her eggs in the soil. And if you have a thick mulch layer, she can't get past the mulch to lay the eggs. So we don't, if you can help it, at least have some space in your yard with no mulch so that the ladybugs can come in. And turn your lights off so that you're not distracting them so they can communicate with each other, that kind of thing. Parasitic wasps, I talked a little bit about before, which are super cool. If you've got hornworms, they will come. Um, what's really neat is some plants will actually give off the signal if they're being eaten by caterpillars to attract these parasitic wasps, and they'll come all on their own and try to take care of the problem for you. And dragonflies eat basically everything. They're very cool predators. Dragonflies like perching platforms. So if you have the thin garden stakes that are like the size of your pinky finger, that width, they like to sit on top of it. So if you just put a few of those in your yard, not necessarily holding up any plants, they'll come and use it to hang out. They also like string, they'll sit on string. Lacewings, the adults feed on pollen and nectar. So if you've got goldenrod, they really like that, or tansy or yarrow. Also Queen Anne's lace. Now, we talked about natives a little bit before, and Queen Anne's lace is not native, but it's kind of everywhere. If you want the native alternative to Queen Anne's lace, you can plant the American carrot. It's about the same thing, very similar plant species, and lacewings will come to that as well. I already mentioned leaf litter for your fireflies. Parasitic wasps, the adults drink nectar. They like dill and parsley, and again, that's carrot groups. And spiders. If you love spiders, give them shelter. They need space to build nests, if they're or webs if they're web builders. If they are jumping spiders or grass spiders or what else we got? Funnel webs. They like plants that they can bend the leaves into a cone shape and they make a nest in there. Usually smaller leaved plants they prefer. If you've got some shrubs, they'll do that. Or you can take really small flower pots and just put them on their sides under a bush. I'm talking like the really, really small ones. Just scatter them kind of under the bush layer in your yard, and they'll make webs in there. You'll get some good stuff going. Soil health. I did mention earlier how important it is to have soil aeration. It improves water penetration and root growth. Ants are really good at this. If you have ants around, you probably have some nice aerated soil. And they eat pests, problem insects like termites and fly larvae that might do damage to your garden or your property. Ground beetles are around. Springtails are pretty cool. You often find springtails living with terrestrial isopods. They seem to have a bit of a buggy little friendship going on. They're both decomposers and they eat fungi and bacteria. They're good to have. So these decomposers are also re-releasing nutrients back into the soil. So you want them around. And then our buddies, the centipedes and millipedes. Centipedes are fantastic predators. They will eat anything they can catch. And millipedes are another type of decomposer. And it is important. You don't just want terrestrial isopods, or you don't just want springtails. You want a wide variety. And I talked about biodiversity before and how important that is in your garden. You need multiple animals doing the same job So you have overlap. And that tends to be if something happens to a few of those animals or bugs, you've got backups to keep doing the job that needs to happen in case of disaster. Pesticides, please don't use pesticides if you can. They're not usually species specific. They can indiscriminately harm the bugs that you want to keep around. So I try not to use them. Just because it's organic doesn't mean it's safe. Uh, you can make pretty toxic chemicals from chrysanthemums, and they'll call that organic, and it's very dangerous for people. So just be aware of labels. Sometimes labels are a little bit weird. Let the ecosystem do the job for you. Bring in your beneficials. They'll handle it. You can monitor pests for damage. You can encourage natural predators. You can see there's coverings. Sometimes you can put coverings over things. And there are plenty of traps, or you just go out there and squish them. Go squish those guys that you don't want. Take those big chunky hornworms right off your tomato plant and feed them to a bird. You can do that. Uh, if you must spray. Now I know aphids can get absolutely out of control. You can take a 50-50 soap and water solution and just spray them. The water soap solution doesn't harm your plant. If you just get it on the aphids, you're good. It's not really leaving a lot of residue. And what it does is it suffocates the aphid, which is not a great way to go, but sometimes you got to do the dirty work, I guess. And that's because insects do not breathe through their mouths like we do. They have what's called sphericals on their abdomen. They have an open circulatory system. Often you'll see bugs like pumping their bodies, and that's how they breathe. So if you stick a bug's head in the water, it will not drown. But if you stick its butt in the water, it will. That's how the system works. So yeah, you can use soap and water if you have to. And finally, consider a seasonal garden. Your garden is going to be different with each passing of every season. You want to treat it accordingly to make sure your bugs are well taken care of and welcome. In the spring, everyone's waking up. Now, like I mentioned earlier, insects and some arachnids go through diapause, and that they either do that as adults. So morning cloak butterflies will diapause in your leaf litter as adults sometimes. A couple other butterflies do that too. Ladybugs do it as adults. Um, Mosquitoes do it as eggs. Uh, there's a lot of things. Obviously, some butterflies do it or moths rather, as chrysalis. Beetles do it as cocoons. You've got a lot of options there. And oh, I did want to mention one talking point about mosquitoes, and I know because I am a mosquito biologist, no one wants to attract mosquitoes to your garden. I get it. They're not fun, but only the females drink blood, and they only drink blood after they've mated when they need to create eggs. The rest of the time, all the males are only drinking nectar, and the females are mostly drinking nectar like 70% of the time, and they are pollinators. They are excellent pollinators for orchids, especially some native orchids here in New Jersey. Their primary pollinator is mosquitoes, so don't be too hard on them. They do have a job to do as well, and you'll see them in the spring and the summer. Anyway, so you want to bring out early blooming flowers like spring beauty or willows. So your bugs that wake up first, like your flower flies, they're going to need something to eat. So try to stagger your bloom throughout the season if you can. Don't mess with the mulch and soil layer. Please wait till it's about 50 degrees for a few weeks. So give everything time to wake up and come out of hiding. If you start raking and moving stuff around, you might kill them in the leaf litter. So just let them hang out. Once we get to summer, this is when all the magic is happening. There's pollination, there's mating, there's reproduction. You really want to have flowers blooming all summer long that are going to attract the beneficial insects and your pollinators. Of course, milkweed, please. Our monarchs are desperate, desperate, desperate for milkweed right now. I was just reading a paper a few weeks ago that by I think it's 2080, there's a 90% chance our Western group of monarchs will go extinct if we do nothing. And there's a 55 to 75% chance our Eastern monarchs will go the same route. So please plant your milkweed, do whatever you can to help them along because, well, I don't think they're not going to get any help right now. They're supposed to go perhaps on the endangered species list, and I don't have high hopes for that. So make sure you can do your part as a homeowner to make small islands of food for these pollinators and insects. So again, blooming flowers throughout the summer. Shallow dishes so they can drink, a little shelter. You can see in this plant in here how dark it is. That's lots of room for small animals and insects to hide and cool down from the heat a little bit and hide from predators. They all need some place to shelter, basically. In the fall, it's winter prep time. This tiny solitary carpenter bee is entering this hollow stem. She is going to lay eggs and then put a little food packet with those eggs, cover the layer, lay some more eggs, some food packets until she's all done. This is prepping. Those eggs will overwinter and become new bees the following spring. So try not to touch things in the fall. You can cut some of these hollow plants, maybe cut them to a few feet so that the bees and other animals that might use those spaces can get in there okay. And then don't touch them. Just let them go. Try not to do any leaf blowing. Fall, everything is kind of winding down. Um, they're all looking for a place to diapause, if possible, when they're done mating. Winter, kind of the same thing. Don't touch anything if you can help it. Leave them insulated shelters, leave some of the mulch and the dead plants in the leaf litter. If you clean anything up, you might inadvertently wake them up too early, and then they have no food source, or you'll kill them. Some of this is this big leaf here is a Luna moth cocoon that's in there. They usually find them along the ground in the leaf litter. And then this is a Carolina mantis, our native species of mantis here in the Northeast. This will overwinter as well, and then you'll have baby mantises coming out in the spring. So all that to say, you can invite these great little guys into your garden. They will make your garden a better place. And there are ways to mitigate some of the more naughty, naughty bugs. So I guess you can find me. Oh, I have a podcast called Bugs Need Heroes, where I discuss the inspiring, amazing abilities of some of our lesser known or lesser loved bugs. Please, you can check that out anywhere you get a podcast. And if you'd like, you can follow me on Instagram or Blue Sky. I do post photos of insects and wildlife and plants and that I've taken, and I talk a little bit about what they are and why they're important. So thank you. Thank you everyone for having me, and thank you, Wild Ones, for the invite. Much appreciated. I can you want me to stop sharing? Okay.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing all this amazing information. We are so, so grateful.
Sure.
I am going to get us started into the question and answer portion. We have taken the questions from the chat as well. If you have any specific questions that you also want answered now, feel free to include them in the chat so that we can address them. Okay, great. So just give me one moment. I am going to share my screen. Amazing.
If you're gonna
Great.
stop sharing, Haley, would that be helpful?
Yeah, that would be great if you don't mind.
Yeah, there we go. Now I can see the chat.
Great. Okay, perfect. So the first questions that I have for you are questions about specific bugs, it seemed like, or insects in general, arachnids, etc. I'm gonna just call them bugs for the purposes of
Bugs is
simplicity.
fine. Yeah.
Great. So yeah, so one of the first questions that we had was, can you talk a little bit more about the firefly's life cycle?
Oh, sure. So fireflies begin life in the soil as eggs. Females will lay their eggs. Well, actually, first, before I get into that, let me tell you a little fun firefly tidbit. Now, some firefly adults feed on nectar and pollen, and others are feed on each other. They're cannibalizers. So we know that fireflies blink to attract a mate. Certain species, the bigger species of firefly, will pretend to be another species female and blink to attract a male and then eat that male. So they're pretty
That is
tricky.
diabolical.
Yeah, they're great. They're very cool. So that's a little fun. If they've avoided being eaten by their peers or some other animal, they will lay their eggs in the soil. Once the soil, they will, and then usually they overwinter and they emerge in the spring. They emerge as these crazy looking, sort of almost like dune worm-esque larval form. And they are active predators. They will walk along the forest floor eating anything smaller than they are. They're bad butts, man. They're cool. They're voracious. And then they'll go through a few what we call instars. Instars are molts, different stages, and every time it molts, it gets a little bigger until eventually it pupates. And then this takes a few months. It might take a few months, depends on the region and the temperature. Temperature speeds up insect development. So if it's cooler, it'll take longer. If it's warmer, it'll be faster. Then they emerge as adults and start the cycle all over again. Yeah, they're pretty neat. I love them.
That is super cool. Thank you so much for elucidating on that and making it clear for all of us how the fireflies work. I thought that was really interesting.
Sure.
Another question we had was, do ticks, like the ticks that like burrow into you, do they offer anything beneficial to the ecosystem?
Their food. Ticks are a common food source. Possums eat a ton of ticks. They're not their primary food source, but they do eat many, many ticks a year. Other other than that, not really. They're really just pretty good food. They don't pollinate. They don't Yeah, they're just food. They're not great. Sorry, ticks.
No.
I always try to like find a way to defend them in some way, but there's really not a lot. So kind of a lame food source, super
Mm.
annoying to everybody, that kind of thing. Sorry,
I
ticks.
wouldn't want to be a tick, you know? Okay, great. Good to know. We had another question. So Andrew had shared a story about how he said, I went to get a vinyl record for my collection, and in the basement in a dark corner, there were thousands of little grubs between a third of the covers. The covers got completely eaten. Do you know what kind of bug that might have been?
Were they who was this, Andrew?
Yeah, Andrew. Yep.
Hi, Andrew. Were they black and fuzzy? If they were black and fuzzy, they could have been carpet beetles, which they love eating any kind of like papery organic matter. They destroyed part of my insect collection, believe it or not. They got
Oh
into my pinned insects and ate a bunch of
my
the
God.
insects. Super irritating.
That's so messed up. He said that they were white though
White. What could that be?
and tiny. He said like there was like a bunch of tiny little ones all
Teeny
together.
tiny. Maybe, maybe fire brat larvae? Maybe, or maybe earwig larvae if they're really small. It's hard to know if they're super tiny. But
Yeah.
that sucks, Andrew. I'm really sorry. I hate
Yeah,
that
I'm
for you.
sorry.
Ugh.
Ugh, bugs, but they're still good, you know? I actually had a question about my favorite bug, which was what the isopod, right? So is there, because isopods are so old, how like an insect like that, is that like ancient, or like where's the time period that comes from?
So they are very old. Isopods in general are kind of around, it's like before the dinosaurs. So way beyond 65 million years ago, we had isopods. And they're not insects, so good to remember that they're crustaceans. They insects have three body segments and 6 legs. These guys have many more legs than that,
Mm-hmm.
and gills. They have gills, so they breathe water while on land. And that's why you find them in super moist spaces because they will desiccate, which means dry up very, very easily.
I see.
Um, so yeah, I love them, even though they're technically not from around here.
Yeah.
They're really good for your garden too, but yeah, they're old. They are ancient animals. Have you
Yeah.
seen the deep sea ones?
I've seen I love the horseshoe crab. I don't know about the isopods in the deep sea, but I love the horseshoe crab.
There are there's like there's deep sea ones in there. They're like this big. They're like a football that's an isopod, and they're all white because you don't really need to have color in the deep sea because it's dark.
Mm-hmm.
You should Google that one later on
Totally.
because they're very cool.
I'll definitely have to check them out. I feel like I know what you're talking about, but I'm not like, I can't physically imagine it right at this moment.
They're
Um, I had a
yeah, look it
question
up.
about, oh, I'm sorry. I had a question about what was the most interesting fact you learned in your research about mosquitoes?
Oh, oh, that's a good question.
Something that either just like surprised you or just something, anything that was the most, wow to you.
So, part of my research, so I studied their genetics and their behavior. In the genetic study, I was looking at a particular gene, and that gene is called TRPA1. And what it does, it is an ion channel in the membrane of the cell. And the cell can be a neuron, a muscle cell, whatever. It's in lots of different parts of cells in bugs and in us too, but it's called something slightly different. And it's responsible for um, letting that insect know it's in a dangerous spot. So if it gets too hot, that gene activates and it should leave. The bug should
Yeah,
have what we call an avoidance behavior, so leaving.
yeah.
If it's eating something noxious that will poison it, it should tell it to spit that out. Don't keep eating it. But with mosquitoes, so it's a temperature sensing gene. They have it on the antennae and on the proboscis, and on what we call the labellum, which is around the proboscis. And it helps them distinguish host body temperature from background temperature and helps
Oh.
them find you. So it's
Oh.
not always a deterrent. It's very cool.
I'm so upset about that. What the heck? What the heck biology and like what is it like like how things have grown and changed over
Yeah.
time. Gosh darn it.
And on top of that, so the mosquitoes end up having um they are a lot more responsive to this gene because their eyesight's bad. So mosquitoes
Oh,
can't see very well. They can see, but they can't distinguish detail and they have a hard time
yeah.
telling us from other things.
Yeah.
And because of that, they really rely on temperature to find you. Now they also are attracted to carbon dioxide and to body bacteria scent. But they have lots of mutations in this gene for host finding through heat. Whereas other flies that bite people, like sandflies or I don't know, biting midges, they don't have a lot of mutations in that gene. They have a few. So I think mosquitoes
Hmm.
have really turned that gene into
Evolved.
like, we need you. Yeah, it's really
Wow.
cool.
So what I'm hearing is I have to just make a body double fake version of me that has like a heating pad in it and some perfume that smells like a human. Got it,
If
got
you
it, got it.
If
Writing
you've
it
ever seen the
down.
movie Predator, just be like Arnold Schwarzenegger and cover yourself in mud and you'll be just fine. They
There you
won't be
go.
able to
Anytime
find
I
you.
go out now, I'm gonna be in a mud outfit and that's gonna be fashion from now on. So the next questions I have are a little bit more about like plants, specifically native plants. If you have any recommendations, one of the people asked, let me see if I can find out who it was, but which plants have hollow stems? It doesn't have to be native, but obviously we love to promote. Oh, it was from
Yeah.
Terry. Promote native plants. So if you have any
Hi,
recommendations.
Terry. Um, any reed, all reeds are hollow. So if you can plant reeds, there are a few native grasses that might do the job if they get thick enough. Who else has a hollow stem? Maybe echinaceas might have a hollow stem, but don't quote me on that one. But generally reeds. Reeds are nice because they get woody. You want a hollow stem that's going to be woody over winter and not just fall apart. But
They're
yeah, mine's
saying our friends are saying Joey and Eva said Joe Pye weed. Does that have a
yes,
hollow
yeah,
stem?
yep, yeah. Joe Pye weed is hollow. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Good
Yay!
save.
We love
Yeah,
it. Teamwork.
definitely Joe Pye lead, and they're native, so good, good, good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, good to know. Another native plant question. What is like the top? I know when you were talking about it in your presentation, you were like, oh, there's a couple. Oh, ironweed is another one.
Oh,
With
yep,
a
yeah,
hollow
yeah.
stem
That sounds
too.
about right.
Cool. So, I know you were talking about there were a couple plants that like served, different communities of bugs. Is there one native plant or like one or two that you would say like these are the ones that you should have in your yard to, attract a variety? Like if I only had a little space, like what would be the one or two that you would recommend?
Uh, Definitely milkweed.
Nice.
And bee bane is good too,
Mm,
and buttonbush. My goodness, do bugs love buttonbush? If you've got room for buttonbush, I know they can get kind of big.
yeah.
So yeah,
Awesome. Good
yarrow
top
is really
three.
common too. Yeah.
Okay, milkweed, buttonbush, and uh,
Bee
bee
bane.
bane.
Yeah.
Awesome. We had a question from the chat asking, do ants actually pollinate native ginger?
I'm not sure what I don't remember what native ginger looks like. If it's got tiny little flowers, it's very likely. Now I think it's also good to remember the ants aren't really the primary pollinators for
Yeah,
things. They're very much secondary pollinators. But I think is it maroon flowers? Oh, in the ground. Oh yeah, if they're really close to the floor, to the ground, it's probably ants. Yeah. And
cool.
it's probably accidental. They don't, they're not trying.
I have another question about plants in general as well. One of the questions came from the chat said, what exactly is the difference between nectar and pollen?
Nectar is sweet. That's where the sugar is. It is liquid generally. Pollen is pollen grains. It's more I mean, everyone, you guys have seen pollen, right? It's like a dust. Pollen is high in other nutrients, but not really sugar. So the
Got
two
you.
combine, and generally when we think of our solitary bees who make food packets for their babies before they pack them up for the winter, they do use a combination of nectar and pollen to get
Mm.
a full nutrient load.
Okay, so yeah, it
So,
makes sense. It's like, you're getting a couple different types of food, like as if I was
mhm,
getting by different food sources.
right. Yeah, you
Awesome.
can't really just live on nectar.
Got it, got it. Yeah, like if I just had like chickpeas for the rest of my life, like
Yeah, yeah,
it
not
would
a
not
good idea.
sustain me. Awesome. Okay, cool. I had some questions from about invasives as well, or like non-native species. One of the people in the chat, let me see, Mary asked, do you feel that non-native praying mantids should be like eradicated in their areas, or like what is the idea in that section, in that area?
So we have the European mantis and the Chinese mantis.
Yeah.
They are invasive. So, and you mentioned two words. You mentioned non-native and invasive, and
Mm-hmm.
there is a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Non-native species are usually have been what we call naturalized by now. They're
Yeah,
no
like the
longer really
isopod.
having, yeah, like the isopod. They're not having heavy impacts on other species. Invasive species are doing harm, and whether that harm is to us, like we have plenty of invasive mosquitoes that are carrying disease here that we don't want, or they're harming the ecosystem. Chinese mantids are out competing Carolina mantids in some spaces. Not every space, So in some regions, I would say, yeah, it's hard to kill a mantis because they're so cool looking. So I understand it's probably not going to be a popular thing for me to say, but I would kill them. I would have no problem. I've seen so few Carolina mantids in the past 15 or so years, and more Chinese, specifically the Chinese mantids, that they're like bigger. You
Mhm.
can tell the difference between the Chinese and the European. The European has like a white spot on the forearm.
Oh, okay.
But you kill either, you can kill either of them. That's fine. The
Okay.
Carolina mantis has like a wider abdomen and can be sort of camouflagey looking.
Uh-huh.
They're kind of gray. They're beautiful, really, really beautiful. But just anecdotally, I haven't read any papers recently about it. I feel like I have noticed way less of our native mantis. So I would feel free to crush. Their oethicas, which is their egg cases, look very different. So
Yeah.
if you can learn to identify them, you could potentially get rid of the invasive oethicas when they're
This
eggs.
is the little white spot that you're talking about. I'm sorry, it's like going in and
Oh,
out.
yep, yeah, yeah, you can see the spot on the
Good to
forearm.
know. Good to
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I actually found this is a random story, but I was feeling so horrible. But I don't know. Whatever. I found a mantis outside and I like had just lost my cat of like 11 years and I was
Oh,
like
I'm so
so
sorry.
sad, but I was like, "Oh my God, this mantis, it loves me. I'm gonna take it home." And I brought it home and I kept it in like this big cage and I gave it everything it needed, whatever. And it had like mantids and whatever, but that was the one. So that was the European.
Oh, that's what you had. Okay,
Good to
cool.
know because it ended up dying and all of the babies ended up dying too. So maybe I just did the world a service and I felt so bad for the last like literally like year and a half that I
Oh,
was like I thought I destroyed a Carolina mantis population. It's like, oh my God. But now that I know,
was
you've
European.
lifted everything, every guilt that I've had based on this experience. I don't even talk about it with anybody because I'm
Spirit
like,
lifted. Yeah.
no, for real, you saved me. Thank you. Thank you.
My a friend of mine had a found a mantis oethika, and I think it was a Chinese mantis oethika, and she brought it into the lab and put it in a little cage, and it
Hmm.
hatched,
Yeah.
except she did not use the right lid. And
Yes.
we came in the next day and we had tiny baby mantids hanging from the like on the ceiling all over the walls, and they're eating each other. They're like fighting. I'm like, what is going on in here?
Oh my
There was
goodness.
probably 250 baby mantids all over the lab, like everywhere. We kept finding them for a week. So
Wow.
it was something. Yeah.
That is so interesting. Yeah, we had like because it was in a warm environment, the babies like hatched and she had babies in the cage and everything. And it was like crazy,
They're
like
so
trying to keep
small.
track of all of them and like it was in like a fish tank. So like, it was an insane experience. I'm glad to know that it was not native because I was so devastated. Anyways,
Oh,
it's okay. So I had a question for you about another invasive plant. I mean, another invasive species.
sure.
The spotted lanternfly. You probably heard a
Mm.
lot about it
Oh
over the
yeah.
years. Do you have any opinions on them or like opinions on the practice of like getting rid of them, like the poisoning of the trees and etc.? Like, do you have any like thoughts about the spotted lanternfly in general?
When that first happened, they out this we'll call it a bit of an outbreak of spotted lanternfly. We all kind of panicked, and I say we as the scientific community, like, oh, these things are they're you can think of them as giant aphids.
Mm-hmm.
They're not aphids, but they are sapsuckers. And we were very nervous they were going to destroy our orchards, our vineyards, other crop things. And then they kind of didn't. They really
Oh,
didn't do a whole lot. The
yeah.
first couple of years, there were so many, right?
Yeah.
And then, and that's because the local fauna didn't know that they were food. Now
Yes, exactly.
they don't taste good. So when they open their wing, you can see the red that's in here.
Yeah.
Generally, if there's red or something brightly colored on a bug, it tastes gross. So they're
Interesting.
telling you I'm yucky. Uh, and so for the first couple years, nothing ate them. And then you get some brave birds. You get a brave robin, you get some brave crows, and they eat them. And they find out we can eat this. the spiders start doing their jobs. The spiders eat them, and their population tanked. And I think they also tanked because we were treating the trees. Um,
Yes.
I hated that. People in my neighborhood were putting tape on the trees. I
Yeah.
can't. I can't stand that. It was catching everything but spotted lanternflies. Yes, yeah, bats. Sometimes bats may eat them.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot in the literature right now about bats. Definitely the skinks will eat them. Lizards don't have the same they don't have some of the same aversions that mammals have, so they may
Mm-hmm.
not taste as bad to lizards. But yeah, so things are eating them now. We've poisoned the crap out of the trees,
Yeah, right.
which I don't like, but I don't think they're not going anywhere. Now that they're here, they're not going anywhere, and they
Mm-hmm.
will continue to spread west. It'll be interesting to see what happens when they
Yeah.
hit vineyard country in Napa Valley in California.
Yeah.
We'll see, I guess. But yeah,
That
it
is so
was a
interesting.
disaster. And we were all very nervous, but
Yeah, I mean, I also think that
it
people
worked
just
out.
like took out all of their anger on this
Mhm.
like one species with like the state of the world. They were just like,
Yeah.
"What? The spotted lanternflies caused all of this horribleness."
Yeah, over the pandemic, people were going nuts. They're like, I'm gonna, and they were just squishing them. I've
Yeah,
never seen our population
come
mobilized
together. Yeah,
in
it's like
such a way.
Pokemon
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Some researchers in, I think it was Pennsylvania, made an app where
yeah,
you could like track your lanternfly kills, and they made a game out of it, so it
that
worked.
is so cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you, Susan. I really appreciate their kind words. That's very kind of you.
Thank you. Yes, we're almost done with some
Thank you
the
so
last
much.
we have the last couple of questions. How this is just a general question to you. How can we work to change the negative narratives surrounding insects and bugs? Like how can we as people, do our part?
Um, when you see one, and this I think is really important to consider when we talk about our children and little girls, especially, bugs are not yucky. Bugs are
Hmm.
friends. Bugs are cool. When you
Yep.
see a bug, tell your friend a neat fact about that little guy, and it'll blow their minds because there's plenty to talk about. When I was a little girl, I grew up in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey in the forest. I was a feral little animal running through the woods. My father set up a kiddie pool in our backyard, and anything I could catch, snakes, turtles, bugs, fish, anything, and I would catch everything with my hands. I bring it back. We put it in the kiddie pool. Sometimes it has water in it, sometimes it doesn't, depending on the animal. And we
Hmm.
we talk about it. Oh, this is what this is. This is what its job is in nature. This is why he's cool. We feed him a little something appropriate, and the next day I return him exactly to where I found him. And my father always told me, nothing is yucky. And that's what we need to tell our children and what we need to tell each other. Nothing is yucky. Everything is awesome. And it
Guys make me
really
ticks.
truly is, except for maybe ticks. Sorry, ticks. Maybe lice, but yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, that's a beautiful
Yeah.
idea. And it clearly inspired you to, pursue your career in the way that you care for bugs as you do now,
It
which is
is
super
why I am who I
inspirational.
am. Yeah. Thank you. I
That's
appreciate that.
beautiful. It's amazing. Yeah. I think that's pretty much it, unless anybody has any last pertinent questions. If not, then I'll get into the closing statements. Thank you, Annette, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Really appreciate it. Yes, that was a wonderful story. I did really appreciate that. I have a nephew, so now I'm going to start incorporating that tactic
Yeah.
into
Thank
our
you, everyone.
daily
Yeah.
conversations. Amazing. Okay, great. So thank you everybody for being here and participating in the webinar. I hope you all enjoyed the content and we hope to see you at future events. If you'd like to join our newsletter and be updated on, what is going to be coming up and what webinars we will be having and in-person events, feel free to add your email into the chat now. so that we can take it and add it to our mailing list. I'm going to post a couple links in the chat. One is for our website, where you can sign up and join your local Wild Ones chapter. Another is for our YouTube channel. So if you missed this, you're here for the webinar, but if you missed any part of it, or if you want to rewatch it, it's going to be on our YouTube channel. So thank you so much, Kelly, for letting us do that, as well as our social links so that you can, follow us and support us. We really appreciate you guys for being here, and we really hope you could consider joining our membership. That is how we support this mission of native plants, having these amazing webinars and bringing a spotlight to the beneficial insects and Kelly's awesome work. Thank you so much to our amazing guest, Kelly, and I'm grateful for all of the knowledge that you've shared tonight about the amazing insects in our yards. I hope everyone has an amazing night. Thank you so much for being here, and bye. Take care.